Now, there are still Londoners alive who lived through an event so awful it's almost impossible to contemplate. It was on this day, or rather this night, 81 years ago, that death rained down from the skies above the capital in numbers that almost defy belief. 100,000 bombs. 100,000 bombs in one night. 100,000 bombs in one night. The 500 or so German planes that dropped them were not avoiding civilian casualties. They actively sought them, in fact. Such was Hitler's desire. It was the worst single night in what became known as the Blitz. By the morning, the death toll of men, women and children stood at 1,500 and counting. To give that some historical context, that's almost half the number of Ukrainian civilians killed so far by Putin's bombs and shells and missiles over the whole course of this year's Russian invasion. That number has been increasing rapidly recently. Famously, although Buckingham Palace suffered 9 direct hits, the King stayed in London throughout the Blitz. His daughter, our Queen, then a young teenager, would have heard the dreadful din of London being pulverised from the relative safety of Windsor, where she was sent for her safety and that of the succession. Today, the Queen is one of a dwindling band of World War II survivors who remember how it feels to fear, to really fear an invasion, to know what it's like to go to sleep every night wondering if you'll be woken by a cacophony of church bells, the signal that meant German troops were landing. Well, it's a poignant thought that our sovereign, having lived to see Britain defy the Nazi yoke, should now see her subjects menaced by another tyrant. It's a sad thought that today, for the first time in her long and glorious reign, she was not well enough to satisfy the act of constitutional theatre that lies at the heart of the monarch's role, because year after year the Queen's speech has been an annual reminder of Her Majesty's ability to rise above the party political fray. She announces policies and bills and initiatives, but we never get a clue, do we, about what she actually thinks of them. How often over the years did she return to the palace, kick off her shoes and turn to her late husband Philip and express what she really thought of her government? And given the significance of today's date, the anniversary of the worst day of the Blitz, I wonder, as she watched Prince Charles carry out her duties, whether she gave much thought of what some will think is a glaring omission in the new parliamentary programme, because amid all the promises, there was no serious attempt to counter the biggest threat now facing Britain, not regional disparities or falling literacy, not waiting lists or carbon targets, but the bombs that another demagogue threatens to flatten London with. He won't be deterred by appeasement, just like the last one wasn't. Putin, like Hitler, lives in a world of brutal realities where weakness in an enemy is an opportunity for exploitation. He is a bully, and bullies are only repelled by those who are willing and able to stand up to them. Today, we should have heard that our government is serious about defending the realm, and that means raising the percentage of GDP that goes on doing so. When Princess Elizabeth became Queen, we spent about 10% of GDP on defence. Now it's 2%. And there are plausible figures, former generals and admirals, who know what they're talking about, who think that's about half of where it ought to be. If the Queen's remarkable reign teaches us anything, really, it's surely this, that her long life has given us a bridge into the past. We cannot remember, we may not even be able to imagine how the world really works when push comes to shove, when a dictator threatens your people with oblivion, but she does. Our Queen knows the meaning of personal and national sacrifice, which begs one key question, if you'll indulge me. What should we give up so that our armed forces have sufficient numbers to buy peace in our time? That's the Brazier angle.